German Chancellor Angela Merkel is now hinting in a recent series of comments that she made that the United States is increasingly just not an ally of Europe, but instead more of an adversary like China and Russia, which has to be dealt with by Europe as an adversary rather than as an ally. And I know the Trumpists and the nationalists and the isolationists and the reactionaries will say, David, Europe, who cares what Europe thinks? We're the best. We'll go it alone. We don't need anybody. But this is actually serious. This is part of a geopolitical realignment that is not good for the United States. It's happening as a result of President Donald Trump. And I'm going to explain why this is such a concern. Okay, so first of all, Angela Merkel. I'm to Angela Merkel's left, much to her left. But she's a skilled politician. She's a powerful leader. She's respected by many of our historical allies around the world. And when Donald Trump was elected, we actually did a segment asking who will become the leader of the free world with the United States laughably under Donald Trump. It was November 14th when we did that story. And my argument at the time was that it would be Angela Merkel. The leader of the free world is, of course, not a literal term. It's a term that is a colloquial term. It dates back to the Cold War, and usually it applies to the president of the United States or the U.S. itself as sort of the paramount democratic superpower. And Donald Trump, as an embarrassment and as a destroyer of geopolitical alliances, is no longer that leader. And that leader realistically is now Angela Merkel. Now, last week, I told you that the superpower triad of Russia, China, and the United States is shifting in a way that is not good for the United States. If you're an economic nationalist, if you're a geopolitical nationalist and you want what's good for the United States, you see deteriorating U.S.-China relations with this constantly escalating trade war, while at the same time you see a growing cooperation or allegiance or alliance, rather, between China and Russia. And that is a relationship that is leaving the United States behind. We talked about that last week. We now also have Europe, according to Merkel, seeing the United States more as part of those adversaries like China and Russia, rather than as inherent and stable allies of the European Union and of Germany. And this means that we're on the outs with basically everybody at the same time, and that's not good for us. Let's look at what Angela Merkel said. Quote, "There is no doubt that Europe needs to reposition itself in a changed world. The old certainties of the post-war order no longer apply. They, meaning China, Russia, and the U.S., are forcing us time and again to find common positions. That is often difficult given our different interests, but we do get this done. Think, for example, of our policy regarding the conflict in Ukraine. Our policies on Africa, too, now follow a common strategy, which a few years ago would have been unthinkable. So we keep putting one foot in front of the other. However, our political power is not yet commensurate with our economic strength. And the implication here is clear. European leaders, more and more, are not seeing the Trump United States primarily as an ally of Europe. And why would they? And by the way, remember, when we had a president, when as I watched Angela Merkel give this speech and read the transcript, I was reminded of when we also had a president who could speak in a more sophisticated way, not like a fourth grader. Things have certainly changed a lot. Every time I see other world leaders speak, I'm reminded of that. But in terms of the substance, Merkel is right to feel the way that she does. Trump ignorantly and irrationally criticizes our historical European allies. Trump slams NATO. Trump threatens tariffs on the EU and European nations and sets up another trade war similar to the one with China that we can't win and that is hugely destructive. Trump backs out of the Paris Climate Agreement and is a complete non-factor in the world fight against climate change, in which Europe is a big player. The United Kingdom is increasingly at odds with the United States and with Trump, including over Iran, by the way, which I'll talk about next. The world is increasingly getting away from the US dollar as a reserve currency. Trump is considering potentially disastrous military action in multiple places, including Iran. This is textbook Russia geopolitics. If you look at Russian geopolitical strategy that they've been crafting for 20 plus years, everything is going exactly the way they want. Now, I'm not saying, I want to be clear, I'm not saying Putin is orchestrating all of this. I'm pointing out that this is out of the literal textbook, Foundations of Geopolitics, for what Russia wants and benefits from. You've got an ignorant moron president in the United States, okay, to put it very simply. You have the three major superpowers, US, Russia, China, increasingly positioned in a way that is not good for the United States, but very good for Russia, right? The US in a massive trade war with China to our detriment, while Russia slips in, makes nice with China, and sort of puts us on the outs of that very powerful geopolitical triangle. And meanwhile, Trump slams NATO, which is exactly what Russia and Vladimir Putin want, and also self-harms our alliances with Europe, which is exactly what Russia and Vladimir Putin want. So we end up with nothing and with no one. And Putin has hit the mango jackpot here in Donald Trump, for lack of a better term. And the United States is both engaging in geopolitical and economic policy that is damaging internally, and at the same time being seen as the bad guy, being seen as the obstinate one that you can't really deal with by more and more of the world. This is very, very bad for the United States. And it is one of the many reasons why this president needs to be removed from power as quickly as possible. At this point, I believe, as I've been saying for a while, that the quickest path to that is, I don't even have to say it. We all know what it is. And it's about 16, 17 months away at this point in time. We've got to do that. Today's program is sponsored in part by Blinkist.com/Pakman. If you've not already heard about Blinkist, it's amazing. It's an app for your phone, tablet, or web browser. And what they do is they take nonfiction books, popular nonfiction, critically acclaimed nonfiction. They condense the book into a 15-minute audiobook. You get all the most important information and insights from each book, but you can soak up the entire essence of the book in one sitting. I've listened to a ton of books on Blinkist. One recent one is Robert Reich's new book, The Common Good. Also Bunk by Kevin Young, useful in preparing me for the pseudoscience miniseries that we're producing. And if you are a David Pakman Show viewer or listener, you can get a 7-day free trial by going to Blinkist.com/Pakman. If you're watching on YouTube, use the link in the video description. After the free trial, if you like it, you can get the full access to thousands of condensed audiobooks for about $5 a month. That's BLINKIST.com/PAKMAN.